Aloha and welcome to Launch Your E-Commerce Part 1. We are very excited to have you all here. My name is Victoria Anurite. I'm a business advisor at the VBOC of the Pacific, the Veterans Business Outreach Center of the Pacific. We are designed to provide entrepreneurial development services such as business training, consulting, mentoring for veterans, military in transition, and spouses who are considering starting a small business or growing a small business. If you're one of them and you live in Hawaii, Guam, or American Samoa, you can sign up for our free services using the link we will present in the chat below. We would love to thank our co-sponsors, the Minority Business Development Agency's Enterprising Women of Color Business Center. Before we start, Shan Word, the program director, would like to say a few words.
Mahalo. Thank you so much, Victoria, and thank you to Dennis and Victoria and his team at VBOC for allowing us to join in on this wonderful program. As Victoria mentioned, we are the Minority Business Development Agency Enterprising Women of Color Business Center. We're based out of YWCA Oahu in the state of Hawaii. However, we can serve anyone in the US states as well as US territories. We're funded by a grant from the US Department of Commerce and their agency called the Minority Business Development Agency. And excitingly enough, we're one of 5 new centers in the nation. Our whole focus is to help minority women-owned businesses grow. And we're here to do that to help overcome social economic factors that have made it challenging for these businesses to flourish. Just for a little context, real quickly, there are over 44,000 women-owned businesses in Hawaii, and that they generate $7 billion. However, that is only 7% of all business revenue in the state. All to say we have a long ways to go. So our center is here to help offer free, innovative, and responsive programs, services, including free counseling, that's business and financial counseling, as well as business certification trainings and webinars. We invite you to go to our website, that's www.ywcaoahu/mbda-ewok. We'll put that in the chat. All you have to do is fill out our client intake form. Tell us about how we can best help you grow your business. Each business is different. So there you can sign up for e-blasts to get the latest news. And we're also active on social media. That's LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. Thank you so much again to VBOC for letting us participate in this webinar. And I hope to meet or help some of the businesses out there. Again, if you can go to our website, then we will be in touch with you. Thank you so much, Victoria.
Thank you so much, Shannon. Thank you for all you do. It's a wonderful service. And without further ado, I would like to introduce you our presenter, Paolo Vidali. Paolo founded Hidden Gears in 2012 and has over 15 years of experience in digital marketing as well as web development. He began his digital career by building servers for software startups during the boom and transitioned into creating custom enterprise e-commerce and digital integrations for different startups in Philadelphia as well as Boston. Paolo is a contributor to Search Engine Journal and has been featured in eContent Magazine, CIO, and Mashable. Paolo, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Victoria. So yeah, thanks for coming, everyone, and thanks so much to VBOC and everyone who put this together. Our goal for today is to walk you through as much as we can in the time that we have in terms of setting up an online store for the first time. And we're also going to cover a bit about setting up your business if you haven't done that yet. So we're going to start out fairly sort of bottom line beginner, and then we're going to go in more and more detail as time goes on into the nuts and bolts about how to set up a store, how to decide what's right for you, how to determine sort of what decisions to make and how they might impact your business down the line. And then we're also going to do a part 2 of this on Thursday, which will go into more detail. And at the end, I'll sort of go through what's on the agenda for that second half. So if possible, if you like what you see in here and you can come back on Thursday, that would be great too. and we'll cover even more content. So yeah, just as a quick way of introduction, I've been developing for the web for a long time, and have been involved in e-commerce since about 2008. I've been developing for Shopify since 2009 and have probably built something north of 80 online stores since then. So I've co-founded a web development design digital marketing agency. We are now based in Hawaii, where my wife and partner live as well. And then we also have team members in New York and Massachusetts, and I'm originally from New York, so we have a lot of ties to the East Coast as well. So we're Google partners, we're ads and analytics certified, we're Shopify partners and Shopify experts. And we work with about a dozen different online stores at any given time, helping folks kind of scale and grow. So just to jump right into it, we wanted to cover some bases in terms of starting out at square one. So maybe you have a concept for an online store or a business that you'd like to run that would have some sort of online component. You haven't really done that legwork yet to be able to really make that happen. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of state-specific information that's going to change wildly depending on where you live. So, we're going to try to keep it a little general in this regard, but I also have to just point out, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not an accountant. Before doing stuff, just please talk to professionals within those fields, before you take my advice over there. So, most folks who are going to start a business, albeit online or otherwise, are going to go through and set up an LLC to start. There's definitely a ton of services out there to help you do all the sort of registration paperwork. Again, there can be different requirements. Some states require you to sort of publish an official notice in a certain newspaper, and there's various forms and taxation registration things you have to do and different hoops you have to jump through. You can also DIY it and sort of figure it out yourself if you Google around for everything for your sort of state and local municipality and see, do I need a business license in my town or city? Do I need to collect sales tax or GE tax? Do I need to actually, have this type of official business address? All these different things are going to crop up. I founded my business in New York State by doing the sort of DIY method. It took a lot of head scratching and a lot of sort of self-doubt, I guess, but in the end, I figured it out. And in the end, it probably, I think, cost me something like $300. The business services typically are going to be $600 or more. There's also sort of online lawyers like LegalZoom or Rocket Lawyer who might offer those services. They're really just doing that paperwork on your behalf. They're not doing anything super special. They just have done it enough times so they know where everything is, all the boxes to tick, all the requirements without spending as much time on it as you would. But you could also get a lawyer if you do have an attorney to do that for you. And the sort of advantage of that would be that potentially they would handle any summons or official business requests through their address. Some of them do that as a service. So that's something that you might want to look into too and see sort of what the cost would be for each kind of method and how easy it is. Depending on your state, it could be very complex and might have to do a lot of different forms. The reason people start out with an LLC generally instead of you might have heard of like a C Corp or being an Inc. incorporated company is because it's much cheaper and much easier even still than doing the C Corp way. And it just allows you to get the ball rolling and sort of get things going. You can later on change your corporate structure if you need to. So for instance, my company is an LLC that's operating as an S Corp. So that's something an accountant or again, a lawyer could help you with down the line if there's different advantages and disadvantages, which I won't go into, but sort of baseline, most basic thing would be to do an LLC. So given that you have some sort of structure, and again, the reason you do an LLC is because you don't want all of this personal liability for your store and various tax liabilities and various things happening. You want to make sure that you sort of have a separation, even if it's just you to start, between your business life and your personal life in terms of the way that all these things are set up. When you have an LLC, you're then also able to open up a business banking account. This might be with a bank that you already have a relationship with, even if that's on a personal level. If you have a car loan or a mortgage, or you have personal checking with them. And often I would encourage you to go with a local bank if possible, because you're just ultimately going to have a better relationship with them. They're more vested in your local community. They're more interested in winning your business typically than a big national chain. And it's going to allow you to build that relationship over time, so that maybe you could get a line of credit, for your business once you get things rolling, or you're able to get a business loan and so forth, and you have that history with them. There may be other banks that you could also cross shop with the idea that you have other personal assets that you could bring. And they might want to win your business and saying, well, I'm opening up this business, I'd like a business banking account, but I also have, I could also bring over my savings account, my other things, and see what kind of deals they'll be able to work with you. There might not be much, but for in the right place at the right time, there might be some incentives in terms of interest rates, or fees that are waived and things like that, where a bank will have multiple reasons to want to continue to do business with you. And again, that sort of bank account that's separate will allow you to book everything through that. So if it's a business expense, it comes out of there. If it's the payment, and receivables for e-commerce products that you're selling, or the revenue that you're making, it's going to there. It's just totally separate and it's siloed, and you just keep everything clean in terms of audits and taxes and all that fun stuff down the line that you'll need to think about. And then, of course, once you have an LLC and you have banking set up, you need to keep track of that stuff. So some folks elect, again, to sort of do a DIY kind of approach, where you just figure out the books and you keep track of stuff, and you decide, I'm going to use this software or this bookkeeping, tool over there. QuickBooks, obviously, I think everyone's heard of, is the largest in the United States. There's an Australian company called Xero, which has been increasingly popular in the US. And there's also sort of lightweight, not quite a full accounting package software that's available, that go under various names. Freshdesk is one of them, Free Agent, etc. And those can help you sort of keep track of things before it gets too complex, but then ultimately either pass that off to an accountant or a professional bookkeeper, or eventually grow into sort of full accounting software. But there should be something that you are using to track those receivables, the ins and outs, so that at the end of the year, or even by the end of the quarter, you can get things straightened out, and you can get better advice on how to proceed. Hey, here's what my books look like. Should I, try to do this? Should I try to do that? Is there anything I'm missing in terms of quarterly tax pay and so forth? And again, those professionals will help you sort of sort that out and set that up. Some accountants will also just set up QuickBooks for you, sync it up to their server, and sort of, really do a lot of kind of IT stuff around it. And others might be more hands-off, but know that there's a sort of range of services there. Also down the line, you eventually will need to figure out payroll. I honestly don't know why anyone would subject themselves to running payroll manually, because it's a huge mess of spreadsheets and math, and it's quite honestly a pain. But again, your bank or your accountant might provide that as a service. And of course, there's big payroll services like Paychex and others that you just sort of put in your bank info and you plug in the hours, and they just calculate all those taxes and they send it to the right places, and they do that compliance work for you. There's also new sort of more web-friendly ones like Gusto that are a sort of newer interface, a little less confusing, a little friendlier, that have different price points, et cetera, and different benefits too, where ultimately sometimes you could run through healthcare and other options through them. The reason why I say payroll is not necessarily right away is because as an LLC, if you're founding by yourself, you don't actually have to be on payroll. You could actually just pay yourself with profits of the business by cutting yourself a check. But when you get to a certain scale, again, your accountant or financial advisor is going to tell you, it would actually make more sense if you do it this way. And there's reasons why you switch over and sort of grow into payroll as well down the line. So that's something also you can chat about. But those are the sort of the broad categories in terms of the semantics of setting up a business that you should be aware of and plan for the starting point, to get something going. But then I also just wanted to touch upon trademark and copyright. Again, ultimately, this is the land of lawyers, so it's not really my domain, but I'll just tell you the sort of rough overview of what I know. And that's basically, you can actually go to the USPTO, it's the Patent Trademark Office, and do a trademark lookup, where you basically, you came up with a brand name, you can type in the name that you came up with and see if anything matches. Has someone else 20 years ago had the same idea for a name? Is it the same type of business? You might search for something and see that it's a, let's say you are an apparel business and you're going to be selling clothing, but someone did a trademark, but they are in the, concrete tile business. And you're like, well, that's the same name, but it's a completely different field. So you may actually still be able to register under your sort of category. But if there's a really close, correlation between someone who's using that name already, obviously you're probably gonna have to move on and pick something else. That's something you should do both when you're trying to name your company to make sure that you're not overlapping with someone else, but then ultimately you may want to actually register your own trademark so that someone doesn't come along and try to take that name and say, well, you didn't register it and you're out of luck. Registering a trademark does take sort of what they call a burden of proof, which means you have to show that you've been using it out in the world, and that and then basically the lawyer will go do a search and make sure from their end, using sort of more advanced techniques, that no one's used it before and they think that it's a good case and so forth. And it takes a long time, months and months. So that's something you'll want to decide whether you want to do. I would encourage you to look into it even more so if you're in, any kind of product where the name of the product is really going to be the flagship of your brand, and it's going to be really important to look into that. There's also copyright. So what's interesting is that the difference between trademark and copyright is trademark only exists if you register and you go through all the steps to do it. Copyright, you can actually post a notice of copyright on your documents, on your web page, etc., and you don't actually have to register it as a copyright as the creator necessarily. It will still, just that notice of it is enough to trigger some level of protection. So just using that will be a good baseline measure, and then you can look into if you are actually producing things like intellectual material. Let's say you're making an ebook or something like that, you probably would want to go ahead and register that ebook as a specific copyright that you want to protect. So if someone takes that or steals that or uses that or makes money off of it without your consent, that's something that you can actually try to recoup on later. And then I just want to put in one notice that there are trademark services, just like there's the sort of build your LLC service. I personally haven't used them, but I've been wary because I've read a lot of different reviews about them being variously misleading. Because again, these trademark services, they're not generally lawyers, and they don't really have that many more skills than you do to figure out necessarily. They tend to overpromise and underdeliver a bit. They're really just filling out the same forms that anyone has access to. So it's more of a convenience factor more than a guarantee. And if they were to mess something up then it's just your trademark's going to get rejected and they're going to keep their money, right? So just be careful and read reviews and make sure you dig in. And if you are going to be paying these services a bunch of money to do something for you, make sure that there's other people sort of verified that it is worth it, that it was successful, that they were accountable for it, and so forth. And the last sort of general compliance thing I want to hit is general excise tax in Hawaii. So anyone who's outside of Hawaii says, what's a general excise tax? But it's basically, instead of a sales tax, there's a general lower than what typically sales tax is. There's a tax on everything. That includes food, that includes business services, etc. Instead of just having a higher tax on just certain categories of things that are in retail sale. So again, obviously every single state is different, and even within states, sometimes there's going to be a difference in the city you're in, the county you're in, the municipality you're in, etc. So you definitely need to look this up on a local level. For Hawaii, the general excise tax applies to all orders that are sold online and shipped within the state. And this PDF of my presentation will also be delivered to folks after this talk is over, and there's a link to sort of some of the rules here, and there's various links throughout that you'll see in blue, so you have a reference there. Generally, you need to report quarterly unless you're doing a lot of in-state sales, then you might need to do monthly. And shipping is taxable as well, so that's something you have to take into consideration, is that in order to be compliant, you're going to have to figure out what are the different things that need to be taxed. Again, if you have certain outside of Hawaii, if you have a sales tax, food items that are made in a certain way might not be taxable. There might be an exemption on clothing in certain cases. There might be all these different things. So you're going to really have to make sure for the place that you do business in, primarily where you live and work, and for the type of things that you sell, and the fact that they're being sold online, check all those boxes and make sure you can be compliant. We'll be going through tax setup also in Shopify in the actual e-commerce store later, and we can talk more about it then. Also note that there is sales tax nexus. Nexus means that basically, no matter where you're based, if you do a certain volume of business with another state and within another state, that you actually might be eligible to collect and remit sales tax to that state. So if I'm based in Hawaii and I ship 10 packages a year to California, I don't need to collect California tax. Those are just tax exempt orders. But if I'm doing more than $50,000 a year with a certain thousands, there's a certain cutoff, I forget what it is off the top of my head, more than something like 2,000 customers and so forth, and I have a large customer base in that state, there's that threshold that I cross in annual sales where I will actually have to collect as if I was, doing business in California directly, even though I don't have an office there, I don't have a warehouse there. If you have employees in multiple states, or if you use a managed warehouse where someone else is shipping the goods for you, or drop shipping, etc., you may be in sales tax nexus to the point where you will need to collect for multiple taxes, account for those, and pay those out, not just for the state that you're in. I'm linking here to a quick guide from Avalara. Avalara is basically pretty fancy sales tax calculation software. It's pretty expensive, but they also have a blog where they go through and sort of lay out these different guides about, hey, what's the trigger in California? What's the trigger in Washington? What's the trigger in Florida? And so you can get a sense of when you might be approaching those sort of barriers that you're breaking through to the point where you need to worry about sales tax. In the beginning, basically, you're going to not have to worry about it as much outside of your home territory, but as you grow, this is one of the things you sort of need to keep on your radar. And the other thing, as I mentioned, Avalara's tax software that can plug directly into your site and do the calculations for you, can generate all these fancy reports for you, but it is very expensive. And by that, I mean, it's typically $1,000 or more a month, which is a lot for just tax reporting. There are tools that are a little bit cheaper, like TaxJar, they're compatible with different platforms, and that I believe starts at something like $80 a month. So there's a sort of range in terms of software that can help you navigate these waters and so forth. I know this is probably prompting a bunch of questions. I'm seeing some in the tax, in the chat about tax and GE tax and so forth. There are folks who just are accountants who consult in this domain. This is not my level of expertise. I know that generally in Hawaii business services do need to charge GE tax. We do, for instance, even though we're a web-based company and doing web services. There are different guides that the state of Hawaii puts out that you can look up, but I can't specifically speak to whether or not you might be compliant, unfortunately. I know that on Oahu there is a independent tax consultant. If you start Googling around various GET questions that are Hawaii specific, I've seen he's written a lot of blog posts about, does this apply to me, does this not, and so forth. That's something I can try to dig up a link for as well. All right, so if you're not totally overwhelmed yet, and we haven't just barely started, apologize, but what I tell folks is in e-commerce, the devil's in the details. There's a lot of things that need to be figured out for you to be able to sell online and at least be compliant doing so, be successful doing so, be able to really deliver things to people that you've never met and maybe a half a world away. It's a complex thing that's tricky to pull off. There's a lot to go through. So hopefully you're not totally overwhelmed. We're going to try to sort of go through as much as we can. Again, this is serving as the sort of intro to get your feet wet, to start playing around yourself, hopefully, and to start really sort of getting your mind around all the things that need to happen. We can't teach you everything you need to know for e-commerce in a day or even a week or a month. I have to say though, I actually don't have a computer science background. I'm completely self-taught when it comes to this kind of thing. And I've seen a lot of our clients and folks that we've worked with over the years just dive in. And if you want to learn how to figure it out, there's a lot of forums, there's a lot of online training, there's things that you can do also to sort of help you get up to speed and get the ball rolling. And a lot for me, at least in the way I learn, is learning by doing. And so we'll talk about that too as we get into showing some of the actual setup of a store as well. So the other thing I'm going to mention is that there's a lot of great resources in your local community, likely that you haven't even thought of maybe tapping into or talking to. Business mentorship, if you can find a business mentor, it's really great and I really recommend it. Finding someone who maybe has had their own business for 20 years or worked for a similar type of business as you're trying to start, giving you tips about what they may have learned or certain gotchas or certain things that work really well for them. That kind of thing is really invaluable. There's VBOC, there's other public-private groups around your state, around your county probably that are around to help. They really are. That's their whole reason of being. There's also industry-specific associations. So if you're in food manufacturing, there may be a food manufacturing association that's just to help businesses like yours sort of get off the ground and succeed. There's the local chamber of commerce who can be really good at making those connections, especially with banking or financing, or hey, you offer this and I know somebody else who's actually looking for that, and really making a lot of local connections is great. Even if you have an online business, doesn't mean you can't make local connections and have ties to your local community and make an impact there as well. I'll also just note something quickly about networking. Before I had my own business, I sort of thought that networking was this thing that everyone was forced to do, and it was all kind of fake, and it was just going to this conference and trying to figure out how to make small talk and so forth. And it's really not. It's really finding other folks in the business community that you just have a rapport with, and you share stories, and you feel like, oh, I'd kind of be friends with this person. They're really nice, or they have my worldview, or we have the same philosophy about this. And it's just connecting with people on a personal level. It's not, hey, I have this thing and I want to shove it down your throat. It's really about just connecting people, meeting them where they're at, and maybe they have a similar business as yours, or maybe they don't. But again, sometimes down the line, those connections and just having those different friendly relationships with folks will bubble up and will help you out a lot in ways that you wouldn't imagine were possible. And then lastly, just a note about online groups and forums, particularly when it comes to e-commerce or anything digital. We'll be talking about digital marketing next session as well. For services and businesses that live online, a lot of the resources live online too, and there's a lot of other people who probably asked your question before, or folks that you can ask it of and we'll give you free advice. And so we'll link to some of those other resources as well. So now I want to jump into picking an e-commerce platform and talking a little bit about what these different platforms can do, can't do, why you might want one versus another, and then why ultimately we're going to land on talking about Shopify today later on. Basically, there's two different sort of core ways that you can look at how e-commerce sites are powered. You basically have marketplaces and platforms. Marketplaces are the big ones, you know, the Amazon, the eBay, the Etsy, those online sort of mega stores that bring in different brands, they bring in different vendors, and they bring in independent people, and they bring in, you know, the big guys and the little guys, and they're all sort of in one place. And the brand is Amazon, or the brand is eBay, but within that sort of you borrow on the resources of their network. So they're doing the advertising for you, they're bringing the people to the marketplace, and then people can go around and decide who to buy from within that, and you might be one of those vendors, but in reality it's their show. There's advantages and disadvantages to this, obviously. If you work with a company like Amazon particularly that's proven itself to be pretty aggressive in terms of how it operates, you might find out that Amazon is going to start a house brand that's very similar to the brand that you've been selling on their platform, because they have all of your data, and they might find it a good business to be in, and you might actually compete with the marketplace that you're on. Or they could open up advertising. Your competitors could, you know, essentially get in front of you in those marketplace search results, and you could be in a battle to, you know, get positioned within that marketplace. And at the end of the day, for any of these marketplaces, you don't own the customer, which means if you sell something on Amazon to someone, you get their postal address, and that's it. You cannot really ever contact them again unless you send them a postcard. Any communication that you have is proxied through Amazon, and that will disappear once that transaction is over. So you can't add them to your email list. You can't ask them much in the way of follow-up questions, and you don't really know who they are. And Amazon owns that customer. And what that means is it's going to be harder to grow your business, because how are you going to get repeat orders? If you have your own store, you have an email list, and you can reach out to that person again, and you can entice them to come back, you've had a lot of those wheels greased, and you've been able to reactivate a customer instead of trying to go out and find a brand new customer, right? And if you're on a marketplace, who knows if they remember your brand name? Who knows if they're searching the right thing? Who knows if they're getting distracted along the way? Your recurring order percentage is going to be much, much different. And so with a lot of direct-to-consumer brands, which basically means, you know, online only or online first startups and brands who are selling things directly on the internet just to the people who come up and buy them, a lot of folks are avoiding the marketplaces because they'd rather keep the customer, have everything in one place, and be able to market to their house list again instead of sort of compete in the general marketplace. However, if you're starting out, the general marketplace has a lot of eyeballs on it, and it's a lot easier to get visibility there than to build up your own independent visibility. Now, the other thing to know is that you could potentially sell on Amazon and have your own direct store. And that's something you might want to explore depending on the type of product that you have and the competition and so forth. We have clients who have Shopify stores and they have Etsy stores, or they're folks who are eBay sellers for 10 years before they felt like they outgrew eBay and started their own brand. So it's not a prescribed path. You can do it in different ways that make sense to you. And if you find success in one of the marketplaces, then by all means, go for it. What we're going to be talking about today is starting something of your own site on a platform. Now, within the platform space, there's what I would consider the biggest players are Magento, Shopify, BigCommerce, and WordPress. And WordPress gets an asterisk because it's not an e-commerce platform, and that's really its sort of downfall, is that it was built for blogging and for informational pages and stuff like that. And you can tack on things like WooCommerce with that. And it initially it seems cheap because there's not as many sort of software fees that go along with that. But it can be a security nightmare because it can be cracked into pretty easily. And honestly, it just gets really, really slow the more products you add because it's not really designed to do e-commerce. So even though that is very popular, I don't recommend it, and I can't, in good faith recommend it, unless you think, well, I'm going to have 5 products max and that's it. And if I come out with 20 products, then maybe I'll redo the store. If you really want to do something that you don't think is going to scale that much in terms of the product line or assortment, then that might be okay. But if you're building a business to scale, I would concentrate on the actual platforms that are designed to do that. I also won't recommend Magento to anyone who's just starting out because it's just so complicated. I've been doing this for a decade and a half, and it's difficult even for me, which is why we don't even offer Magento services anymore, because at the end of the day, I felt it just actually wasn't worth it to charge people money to bang my head against the wall. It's a huge system. If you order something from one of the national retailers that they're either on something custom or they're on Magento. And that's a double-edged sword. It can scale and it has a huge amount of options and be customized to the nines, but it also requires a ton of server power, a ton of backend administration. It's not intuitive, and it's just really kind of difficult to use and really, really expensive to maintain if you're able to build something on that. To give you an idea, if you're going to pay a professional to build a Magento site, I would double whatever you would pay someone to build a Shopify site or anything else, any other one of these here. So I'm not recommending it for beginners. My business is really concentrated on Shopify, and now we exclusively build for Shopify, and we'll go into a little bit of that later. So I'll just say that for a moment. We feel like it's the best combination of scalability with the ability to you can build a store if you're a beginner, or you can run a business that does tens of millions of dollars, and it works the entire way through. BigCommerce is very similar. The reason it's very similar is because it came out maybe 5 or 6 years after Shopify and copied most of the internal structure of Shopify, or imitated it, I should say, but it just honestly isn't as good. It's not as lean and nimble. It doesn't have as good an app ecosystem, and it has a more complex backend than it needs to be, because it just doesn't do some of those admin things as well as Shopify. If you look at it and you like it, I'm not going to say you shouldn't do it, but it's definitely not my cup of tea for that reason. There are other platforms as well. These are what I would call the small e-commerce options. So that's Squarespace, Webflow, Craft, Wix, Square, and then there's a sort of like Weebly, GoDaddy might have tried to sell you something, and so on and so forth. Anything I haven't mentioned. At the end of the day, the issue is that your ability to grow and scale is key. So if you just want to get something off the ground and you say, I just want to sell 1 product or 2 products or 5 products, see how it works, and then maybe I'll invest more in this business, and maybe I'll grow it, and maybe I won't. These smaller options are great because it'll be a lot easier to just get something off the ground, add a couple products pretty easily, and start selling. without a doubt. These are great for what we would call in the software world a minimal viable product. This is like if you want to see whether something's working and just sort of rapidly prototype it and just sort of throw something up there and see if it sticks, these are great. The problem is if you use something like Squarespace, which you know, has a lot of people on it and does offer e-commerce, once you get to the point where you're like, you have to ship something that's complicated, it requires a split shipment, it's perishable, it's digital, it's not UPS, whatever it is, it falls apart really quickly, and you're going to have to re-platform and take everything that you've done somewhere else and rebuild it. And that's why I'm just advising folks to really think about like how fast do I think I'm going to grow my online business versus, you know, how fast do I just want to get out there, knowing that I might have to reinvest and redo some things after. That's something that, you know, I can't tell you without talking to you, but that's something to just be aware of and be considerate of. There's some of these will work well for a year, and then you'll say, oh, I need to redo it, and it's going to take more time and more money. There's a couple of questions in terms of Etsy versus Shopify. I can say Etsy, if you have something that's handmade and you don't have a lot of experience with the web, and you like, Etsy could be fine. The other thing I didn't mention about marketplaces is, of course, there's a lot of fees, and so the more you sell, it may or may not make sense to keep selling that platform because they do take a good chunk, versus if you have your own store, you are paying the sort of monthly fees and you're paying credit card fees, but it's not scaling with the business. You're not paying to list things, you're just paying for the site as a whole. For international options for these, we will talk about international a bit in the next, let's see, I'm just seeing if that's, we're talking about international in part 2. I will say you're just gonna have to look up the options for a specific platform that you want to use internationally and see if they support it. Again, for the smaller platforms, they're gonna have very limited shipping options, and that is going to be the catch primarily for international. The ability to use different couriers, the ability to have different requirements and logic and surcharges and duties reporting and all that fun stuff we will go into on Thursday. But it will be really dependent on what platform you're using. There's also other considerations as well in terms of why you might want to use one platform or another. These are kind of the big ones for me. If someone were to come to me and say, hey, I don't know what platform to use, but, you know, here's my type of products, or here's what I'm going to do, you know, if this is the conversation we would have. So basically, so what products do you have? Is it a digital deliverable where someone purchases something and then you know, email them a link to it? That could be music, could be ebooks, could be something like that. Could be a service, you know, training, something like that. They're physical goods. So does this need to be shipped and put in a box? Does this need to be picked up? Do you want local delivery? That kind of thing. Is it perishable or is it regulated? Are you a brewery, or are you, you know, a farmer's market? Like, you can't just put a bunch of kale in the box and ship it. There's got to be ice packs. There's got to be within a certain radius, a certain geographic range, so it doesn't spoil on the way. There might be restrictions on it. Are there other restrictions on how you can get the product to consumer, either because it's a regulated type of product or because it's just not going to last? Are you chocolatier, you know, et cetera? There's a bunch of different specialty food businesses that would fall in this category, right? The other question is, you know, is it a service instead of a product? Maybe you do have services that you're selling as packages or something else. In the context of this workshop, we're primarily talking about products and assuming it's products, but some of these tools could be used to sell services as well. How customizable is your product? That's a big question in terms of, you know, why you might want to use something or not. Like, can your platform support the amount of options and combos and customizations that you need? Do you need to take someone's initials for monogramming? Do you have 46 colors? Do you have, 5 different materials? Are there upcharges where if you select the gold version, you have to charge $50 more, et cetera? There's the amount of different options within one product can be the fork in the road for picking a platform that also can handle that. Are you doing subscriptions? And if so, how do you want to do them? Is it something that happens monthly? Is it weekly? Do you want people to be able to change their frequency? Do they get a different thing in the box each month, or is it the same thing? Is it a gift? Is it giftable, etc.? All of these questions will determine what platform ultimately is going to be viable for you. And then also keeping in mind with a scaling question, what is the size of your product catalog? Do you have 1 SKU, 10 SKUs, hundreds of SKUs, thousands of SKUs? And if so, what are the actual mechanics of the platform that can allow you to support that catalog? And then multi-channel is the big new thing, is like you might not just be selling online. You could have a retail store with a POS system, a point of sale system, register. Is that synced in? Do you want it to sync in? Do you need it to sync in? Does it sync inventory? Are you wholesaling? Are you providing your goods that you're making to other retailers, and therefore they're getting special price discounts? They have their own PO system, they have their own inventory set, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of different options. I've seen a million different combinations about how people structure businesses. Ultimately, you're going to structure your online business in the way that makes sense to you, which is great. However, the way in which you think you want to run your business and the way that makes sense to you is not necessarily how anyone else does it, honestly. We've seen that pretty much every one of our clients approaches the same problem differently based on their business needs. It could be based on their margins. It could be based on their distribution system. It could be based on how it's made or where it's made and so forth. So there's going to be a lot of different variables, and the more you know about how you would answer these questions, not only now, but 6 months from now, a year from now, et cetera, that's going to help you work with someone or even just do your own research to figure out what's ultimately going to make the most sense. Given that, I just want to say that what we try to do as consultants is figure out not only what you have now, but where you're going. And again, even if you don't have a formal business plan or something like that, it's best to try to future-proof and figure out, okay, well, what if this product that I'm introducing becomes successful? Where would that go? What would happen with that? What options will I need? Because ultimately, if you start investing in the software and the technology and put in all the time to set up an online store, you want it to be able to grow to a reasonable degree. It doesn't mean that you have to do it right away, but if you have the ability to know where you're going, that's great. So I also just want to go into a little bit about why I ended up using Shopify and then why we've sort of focused on it exclusively. One of the things I can say is the scaling is flawless. So we've helped businesses start, which have had $0 in sales, and they could go and grow and do 10 million in sales, and they would not need to change their website. That is extremely rare for that to be able to happen. But the technology that they've built to scale out the servers is really, really good and has really held up the test of time, in my experience. As such, it's managed hosting. That means that Shopify runs the servers. You do not worry about spilling coffee on a machine that then shorts out and ruins your business. They have distributed servers around the world. They take care of it. End of story. You do not have IT problems with a managed host. The flip side of that is you can't do anything you want with a Shopify server. There are limitations, but to me, the advantage is that IT, that security, that scaling, et cetera, is all handled externally. There is a built-in content delivery network, or CDN, as well as Cloudflare built in at the server level, which means that if you have a customer who's in Japan, they will get images from your website from the Shopify Japan server. If you have a customer in Quebec, they will get images from the Canadian server, et cetera. They have a global network that automatically distributes copies of your content to all those different places so that your site isn't just coming from one place and will be slower for people who are further away from you. So that's really nice. It's a very strong app and software ecosystem. So there's a lot of different things that plug into it that can help extend the platform. I think that they've done really well in evolving features and benefits and sort of adding smart things to the software that have helped our clients grow and helped a lot of businesses grow. For instance, they've also, since COVID happened, they've baked in a lot of pickup, delivery, tipping, et cetera, tools to really sort of roll with the punches of the last year and a half. It's very actively maintained. There's always things happening. It's not something that's stagnant. I just helped migrate someone off of a Volusion site, and the interface was the exact same as the last time I logged into Volusion, which was probably 2005. Some platforms do not keep up with the times. They do not keep on investing in their technology. Shopify does. It's also PCI DSS compliant, which means that from a banking regulation perspective, they're storing your customers' credit cards as securely as possible and completely compliant and up to the minute. Again, you don't have to worry about a credit card breach because they're worrying about it for you. And it's as secure as you are. We'll talk about security more in a minute. Basically, what that means is as long as you don't have a really bad password and someone guesses it gets into your store, I've never had a client or known of anyone that I've talked to who was on Shopify who got hacked, except for one person who had a bad Gmail password. Someone got into their Gmail account, realized they had a Shopify store, and reset the Shopify password via Gmail. Still was not a Shopify intrusion. So just keeping in mind, good password security and so forth is really important. And the admin user experience, the admin interface is really, really intuitive. And that's where some of the other platforms, it gets very confusing to even try to fulfill your own order. So we'll be walking through the back end of the dashboard in a little bit today, and you'll hopefully be able to see what that looks like. So if we're almost ready to go, there is one more thing, and I want to talk about security and privacy. So the management of your customers' data is really more important than ever. You've probably seen throughout the news, throughout the last couple of years, privacy and security issues are absolutely paramount. And it's sometimes really difficult to prevent access by bad actors. I've seen other sites, and particularly, unfortunately, WordPress sites get hacked where there have been extortion attempts, where I saw someone's entire customer lists get emailed saying, oh, your payment didn't go through, click on this link. Their entire customer base was basically someone tried to trick them into paying this random hacker money, things like that. It's a really bad look for the company. It can lead to lawsuits. It can lead to companies folding. It's for real. It's serious. And as such, owning a store is a responsibility. Just as if you have a physical retail store and people come in, they trip and fall, like you have a responsibility. With an online store, it's similar, except it's just about privacy security, making sure that people don't get in and do malicious things, because you will hear about it. And unfortunately, by the time you hear about it, it might be too late. So just wanted to share some best practices in terms of now you're a business owner, you're taking over this responsibility. You are only as strong as your weakest link. So if you have a really good password, but you have staff who are using password 123, that is the weakest link. So making sure that if you are working with multiple people and folks, that you have really clear policies about what you're requiring of folks to be secure, and that means using unique passwords, probably using a password manager tool. I'll link to some of those at the end, so that you can use a different password for every single website. Now that means if you're logging into your email versus your domain versus your Shopify store versus your shipping label creator, everything should be different. I know it's not convenient, but again, if there's a bunch of different ways into a site, if every door has a different key, it's going to be a lot harder to get in. I do recommend doing two-factor authentication via an authenticator app rather than SMS. So a lot of sites, if you enable two-factor authentication, you'll get a text, you get something to confirm. It is possible to spoof text messages and to break two-factor authentication that way. There's a lot of people's Twitters have gotten hacked this way famously and so forth. If they have an option for authenticator app, look up what those are and figure out how to use those, because those will add a huge amount of security. Set your policies early. Just come up with, hey, if you're going to work on my store, I'm bringing a designer, developer, have a secure password, have a unique password, and also remove staff or collaborators promptly if they're leaving. Don't forget that they have an account, because again, 6 months on the line, if their email gets hacked, people could get in that way. I recommend not doing any gift cards with set your own or low denominations. That means don't provide gift cards for $5 or $1, or let someone set their price of a gift card. What I've seen with a bunch of different folks over a bunch of different years is that folks who steal credit cards in mass on the internet will actually try to find sites that have set your own pricing, so they can put through a lot of different charges for $1 to test the stolen credit cards to see if they're valid. And then basically you're sort of enabling and embroiled with their credit card fraud. So the biggest thing I can say, if you have a gift card started at $25, don't do anything that's for sale for $1 or $5, because the credit card thieves want a low transaction that won't be flagged and also won't use up the value of the card that they're going to then use or steal or sell on to someone else and so forth. Just careful who accesses code and customer data. If you have the option to not give someone who's working on your site everything, then just give them what they need to work on. So best practice. And then finally, just a note about offshoring companies. Know if you are bringing vendors, where they're from, how many people are involved, etc. It's much easier to have folks add backdoors into systems and not be accountable for their actions if you're getting really cheap work done, and particularly if it's overseas. There's very little incentive to do the right thing necessarily. And then finally, just one point before we get into the Shopify setup. Yes, Shopify handles the CRM. That was a question in chat. That's all in there, and we will be looking at that shortly. So, not to scare everyone, but ultimately, we just want to keep in mind that we do have a responsibility. There are consequences to leaky data, and there's just some smart things we should do and always think about to make sure that we're mitigating any risk to folks. So I'm gonna pause for a 10-second tea break, and then we'll get into Shopify setup. Alrighty. So it's time to switch over out of these cards. Apologize for the graphic design of the slides, but we just want to really focus on the nuts and bolts and not have too many memes and other funny things happening. But basically, I'm going to go through and actually show you the back end of a sort of dummy Shopify store that I have. We'll cover picking a plan, going through the initial settings and what all needs to get configured, setting up products and collections, and showing you what that looks like and what are the types of details you need to do. We'll go through setting up discount codes, how to make a page, how to make a blog post, and going through the sort of menu and navigation options. Though I am showing Shopify, this also, roughly will be what you encounter if you use another platform, particularly BigCommerce, because it did make itself very similar to Shopify. But particularly when we're going through the types of settings that we're going to be setting up, you will need to know this type of information. It might be in a slightly different, form for you to fill it out, but it's all going to be similar things that you need to know. And then a quick note from chat as well. CRM is a customer relationship management system, which is why people call it CRM, because I can barely remember that. Basically, it means, is there a place where all of your customer records live in a consolidated way? Previous to sort of e-commerce, people used to have separate CRM services. That'd be sort of your digital address book where you'd keep all the different contacts. If you've been in the sales world, Salesforce is essentially a CRM where people are tracking leads and stuff like that. And you have the contact's name and their business email and notes and so forth. So Shopify, whenever someone creates an account or you check out, all that CRM data is stored, and we'll see that as well. Alrighty. So I'm just going to switch screens here for a sec. All right, so now we are in Shopify. This is the back end, basically, of the home screen. This is the first thing you'd see when you log in. I did say we'd go through and picking a plan. So basically, I'll have a link in the deck as well, but there's 3 basic plans. There's sort of $29 to $300 a month. Most people, if you're starting out, anything that's brand new to the internet will just be in the basic plan. There are some features here which you can go through, which basically, is there gift card support? What are the shipping discounts you would get? And if there's a couple other bells and whistles, but really anyone should be able to start with about the $29 a month plan. There is a free 14-day trial as well. So you can poke around, and if you don't like it, cancel it, and there's really no consequence to that. As you can see, Shopify, when you sign up, also, I picked this a while ago just as a random test name, but you will have an internal Shopify URL that will be, whatever you set it to be. And what that allows you to do is you can mess around with the store here without it being live and without buying a domain for it. So you could just register for the store, and the store can live on its own address without you having to pay for one other thing, which is kind of nice. When you see this home screen here, you can see that it's letting me know the store isn't actually open yet, and there's some things for me to do and so forth. When you launch a full real store and you go live, what will happen is that you'll have that little dashboard here. It'll show you a little graph of your recent sales. You can check a quick selector, so it's the day or the month or what have you. It'll show you where those orders came from. It'll show you people who logged in recently, and I'll just give you a little more data here. Because this demo store and it's not open, there's not as much going on here. What I want to do is go through the initial settings. This is all the kind of thing that you'd have to do pretty much once, and then you're really not going to have to touch that often. This is more the set it and forget it kind of settings. So that's in this admin bar down here under settings. You can see there's different categories depending on what it is. So if we go to general, this is like the most basic stuff. This is saying, what the contact email is, where emails should be sent from, the name of the company, and your official address. This is just for Shopify's records. This is not public facing. What time zone you want to be in, whether you want to prefix your order numbers by saying, order or something like that, and it'll show you what an example of that might be. The other thing you'll notice right off the bat is if I change something on this page, you can see it immediately prompts me to save on the lower right here and on the upper on the top. But if I remove that change, it also is smart enough to know that since I just deleted that one thing I changed, nothing has changed. It's not going to save, which is really nice. If you're ever on a page and you don't think you changed anything, but it's prompting you to save, probably discard because you don't want to accidentally overwrite something. That's really the baseline starting point. Then we also have payments. Payments are basically how you get paid as the merchant. Shopify Payments is actually basically a rebranded version of Stripe, which you may have heard of, which is now one of the largest credit card processing companies in the world. I've used a lot of different credit card processing companies over my years, and this is by far the easiest. Basically, what it allows you to do, accept everything from Visa to Apple Pay, and it's basically a one-stage setup. So when you sign up here, you'll see that you'll need to put in your business type, your EIN, which you should have also gotten when you registered for your LLC, which is your federal employer number. The business address, it will ask for a business owner's name and last 4 digits of social. Quick little blurb, doesn't have to be that fancy, about your business, and then what people are going to see as the billing statement. And then your banking information, where do you want the money, basically. And that's it, and it should be approved basically instantly. I've once seen it delayed by like an hour, and then you can just basically immediately start charging credit cards. You will also be able to see your payouts. So Shopify Payments will batch all of the different orders that come in a day and give you one bank account deposit for that. In that, you will see that if we were an active store here and we'd had payouts, there would be a log and basically saying, these 3 orders were rolled up into one payout, which hit your bank on this date, and here's the total. It will automatically take out the 2.9% standard credit card fee from that payout, and then it will batch those up and round those up. When you first open your store, it'll be about 3 days before you get your first payment, because you're sort of in a little bit of a purgatory period. They're making sure that you are who you say you are and there's no fraud going on. And then as time goes on and as your orders build up, it should be basically any orders you make that day, you'll get a bank account transaction for the following day. Quick question about time zone settings. You set it to whatever your local time is, and then the admin area and everything in Shopify will use that. So if you're in HST, if you're setting the time for anything in Shopify, it will assume HST, etc. You can also add PayPal as well, Amazon Pay. You can take Bitcoin, you can do any kind of number of things. And there's also a testing gateway that you can use just to do in your own test orders before you go live. You can also change whether to automatically auth and capture for payments, where basically it means as soon as someone places an order for your store, you will authorize and charge that card, which is basically the e-commerce standard, versus you can manually capture payment. But of course, those do expire typically in 30 days. So if you had something that was on a big back order or something like that, you might want to do this. But in general, authorizing and capturing is something that Amazon pioneered in the 90s and has never looked back. So payments, they're actually just really easy to set up so that you can start receiving money. And that's something also that can evolve over time. You don't have to launch with PayPal, but if you decide to do it, you just come in here and add it, and it really takes just basically a couple clicks. There are checkout settings as well that are not payments per se, but other things where you want to control how people check out. Our best practice is to make accounts optional instead of disabled or required. And that allows people to save their information if they want to, but you're not making anyone do anything they don't want to. You can allow customers to check out either just using their phone number if they're getting texts, or to do email, or you can require, hey, you just need an email address to check out. And you can also, even if you require email to check out, you can let them add a phone number on the receipt page after they've checked out to get updates by text if they want as well. And then there's some sort of security and fraud stuff here, like do we require first and last name? Last name, and do we make the shipping phone number optional or required? Our best practice would actually be to do first and last and to have the shipping address required because it just makes any customer service stuff easier. And it will increase the chances that your package actually gets delivered when you send it out. As I mentioned before, there is tipping. So this is particularly you'd want to use if you had a local pickup or delivery kind of system, where you feel like tipping would be an appropriate gesture. If there's no local pickup or delivery, I don't recommend adding tipping, as it'd be kind of non-standard. But if you're, primarily, even if you're just doing e-commerce for just a local business that's really centered in your local community, and it's a type of business where you would have a tip jar out, that kind of thing, you can enable this. And Shopify doesn't take a cut other than the credit card processing fee on that. And then there's some options in terms of order processing, whether you want addresses to autocomplete when someone's typing in as well. If you have any scripts for marketing tools, whether you want folks to automatically sort of pre-select to enter your email list, although they can deselect it as well. And whether you want to send abandoned checkout emails through Shopify. So there's actually a way that you can send an automated email saying, hey, you left some items in your cart, etc. You can do this also with other email marketing tools we'll talk about on Thursday. There's a way to do it very easily in here as well. So I changed my settings, so I'm going to save those. For shipping and delivery, there are quite a lot of options. We'll actually go into them primarily through the next session in terms of order fulfillment kind of stuff. But basically, in broad strokes, there's two different ways that you can do shipping rates. One is that you could use a real-time sort of live carrier rate, where you say, hey, I want to offer FedEx rates, and I'm going to connect my FedEx account, and I want to offer 2-day and overnight and so forth. And then when someone goes to check out, assuming you have your weights set up for your products and so forth, it'll look at your address, the customer's address, and it'll give a live shipping quote right in checkout. You can also set up flat rates as well. There's different flat rates that you could do. So I can add a rate here, and I can say set my own rate. I want to do a custom one. I want to say, flat rate box. I want to say it's $5, and I want to say it's for any order that's under $50. It's that simple. I could do free shipping as well, where I can say I actually want the shipping to be free. Call this free shipping, and I can say it's, instead of it having a maximum price, I want to say it's free shipping over 100, and this will set it up so that there will be a free tier available for anyone who orders with a shipping rate over 100. So you can set up your own tiers based on weight or based on price, if that's what makes sense for your business. You can also, do a USPS live rate with flat rate boxes and etc. And the most important thing is that you can actually set this based on the location where you want to ship to. So if we did not want to do international shipping, and I delete the only rate that's here for the rest of the world, which is basically any other country in the world, it's going to tell me there's no rates. Customers who are in this zone, basically anywhere outside of the United States, won't be able to complete checkout. For the zone, I can also define what that means. So maybe I don't want to ship the same rate to the entirety of the United States. I want to split different states out. If I click on the little 3 dots here and I edit the zone, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to United States. I'm going to, let's say, remove Arizona, Alaska, California. Let's see, let's knock out of here, Oregon and Washington State. Now see that it's reduced the number of states here, and by default also does include territories. And then maybe I want to save that and create a zone, and I can create a special, West Coast US zone, go back into United States, And you can see the ones that I unselected from the one rate are now available to me as rates to select. And now I can have my West Coast rate that's separate, and I can add a different service for that, for instance. So this is going to allow me to split on a state level everything that is available to me there. And that's going to allow me to just be more accurate in terms of what I'm selling, what people are being charged versus what I'm being charged, and not lose money on shipping, hopefully. You'll notice that everything is at a state level. If you want a more micro view than that, we can, but we'll need to use a shipping app, which we'll talk about on Thursday, where I can say, hey, within a radius of this zip code, or only to this zip code, or only to this half of the state, or whatever. You can't get more granular than this. This is the sort of default. So we can see that we can add different rates for different zones. We could elect to ship to everywhere else in the world, or we could add a rate just like I did for the West Coast. I could add one for Japan, I could add one from Canada, etc. And again, this is something that evolves. It can grow with time, and you can shift it around as your priorities change, as your costs change, as your customers change, etc. It will also let you set where you're shipping from and so forth, and you can also set up local and delivery and pickup, which we're not going to talk about today, but those are options so that someone could be able to select your location for pickup and so forth. Taxes, we talked about a little bit before. Shopify will automatically calculate the taxes. That is actually in the backend powered by Avalara for free. You will need to check the box whether you have to charge on shipping rates or not. And you will also manage the places that you're liable for tax in here. So for this example, we have operations in Hawaii and New York. So we have these two locations here. So if a customer is checking out on this store, if they're shipping to the state of Hawaii or they're shipping to the state of New York, they will have all the appropriate local taxes added in there. Not every state, but most states use the destination address. Some states do use an origin address though. So that's something that Shopify will auto-calculate and figure out, so forth. And for instance, New York City has its own special city rate, municipal rate that's automatically calculated if someone's within that radius, etc. If you're in California, California does that a lot on a municipal level. That will be figured out as well. And if you do have a tax ID, you can put it in, and that will just give you basically better reporting. But again, you're probably going to set this once and not think about it for a long time. The locations is basically where your physical location is. Shopify supports multi-locations, up to 5 different locations. So if you have a warehouse in one place, and a warehouse in another place, and a retail location here, a retail location there, you could input all of them and hold inventory in different places to do so. That's probably something that's going to happen down the line though, so we're not going to talk about it today. There's also notifications. So notifications are basically all of the emails that Shopify sends out based on the transactions on your behalf. What that's going to mean is that your order confirmation template, it's editable using code here. Something that if we preview, we can see it's going to be a logo of a company, maybe an intro, a note here, and the person's info, and these are just test products, so different products, etc. You will be able to change the color and sort of the language and so forth, but Shopify is going to do the sort of legwork of sending those out for you. And you can see that it's using these tags to dynamically insert all that information so that it'll just automatically pull the name, automatically pull the order info, and so forth. There's a bunch of different ones. So there's a backend one that's if you cancel an order, if something's out for delivery, if something has you send out a tracking confirmation, the shipping confirmation, etc. There's all different templates, so you can sort of dial in the language if you like, or if you don't do anything, you just put in your logo. It'll sort of take care of the rest for you. Again, these are the ones that probably you won't need to fiddle with that much. It's just going through and doing that first time. Gift cards, we'll talk about in products. Under files, there's just a little very simple file upload management system. So if you did want to just add a photo and link to it somewhere, you can do that. Sales channels are basically the different ways that Shopify can syndicate out your products. So there is an Amazon connector, a Walmart.com connector, a Facebook connector, etc., where Shopify will take your product catalog and say, hey, if you have an Amazon seller account and you want to send your Shopify products to Amazon, so that when you change something here, you take something down here, or it becomes unavailable, it's all syncing up. That's all possible. So there's a lot of options for growth here. For the moment, we're just going to focus on the online store being your sort of primary bread and butter. Just catching up on a couple questions here. I don't think Zelle is supported. See, Shopify does have discounted shipping rates. So Shopify does have for UPS and for USPS. They do not have discount rates for FedEx yet. It is pretty good. I found that the USPS one does beat most commercial rates because they're negotiating on behalf of basically everyone who uses Shopify. Shopify does not by default verify mailing address of a customer, but there are apps that will do mailing address validation. So it'll prompt someone saying, hey, are you sure you meant this address? And it'll try to autocorrect it for them. You cannot by default change your shipping zone based on which island in Hawaii you're on, but that is something with a shipping app you could do at a radius or a zip code level. But right now, default in Shopify is state by state. In terms of transitioning, if you have another account and you want to move platforms, that's what we'll talk about that tomorrow. Thursday during launching. Just to cover sort of how you might transition, but basically you'd have two of them built and you just switch over the domain at the end, but there's a bunch of details with that, which we'll go over in Thursday's chat. Just to round out the settings under plan and permissions, we have basically one store owner, so one sort of main account that can actually kick everyone else out. You're sort of the main admin, and then you can have staff accounts where you can delegate certain responsibilities. I could say, I want someone to log in and only see orders, or I want someone to log in and only see products, or something like that. You can also have a collaborator account. So you can invite, a developer or agency to help collaborate on it, and it won't count towards your actual staff. And you can manage permissions here. You can say, I don't want them to have access anymore, or I want to invite someone, or I want to accept someone's invitation, etc. You will also pick your Shopify plan, or you can change it in here. If you pick the basic plan, say I want to move to a different plan, you can do that as well. The languages, something we'll talk about tomorrow with internationalization. Billing is just your own Shopify sort of bills are all in one place. And in legal, the important thing to note here is that this is not something you have to do, but Shopify does actually create legal templates based on your business name and the info that you've put in here. So if it's basically as suggested, so you could take this and then edit it, but it might give you a running start here. So if I say create from template, boom, it's put in an example policy for me, privacy policy. It's put in examples here. This might be something you bring to a lawyer to work on later, or it might be something you fill out yourself. But it's kind of nice in that they will give you some sort of starting points if you have never done this kind of thing before. This is basically Shopify's boilerplate in here. Then you can copy that, you can make a page for it, and so forth. All right, so these are sort of the sort of once in a while, rarely modify settings. I also want to go through setting up a few other things. So we have products. The products area is really where all of your products that you're going to sell online live. Right now there's none, so it's going to show me this area. If I open up and do a new product here, you can see basically this is the core of what you need to know to sell a product. You need to name it something, to have a description. You can choose whether it's drafted or it's online, so whether it's unpublished or online. You're going to upload some photos for it. You can give it a type. You can give it a vendor name, which is basically, you know, this was made by so-and-so, or if it's you, this is your own brand name. A price, and what Shopify calls a compare at price. So if I put in $5 here and $10 here, Shopify will show the product as being on sale. This is sort of like the MSRP or the sort of original price, and this is your actual price that's charged to the customer. You can put in COGS, so if I put in $2, it's going to calculate my margin for me. Obviously, that's not shown anywhere to the customer, but that will help you do a little costing report without using something like QuickBooks. We choose whether it's taxable or not. We choose, you know, we can choose to put in a SKU, which is basically your own or a vendor's sort of little code for what the product is to represent it, if we're going to sync it to QuickBooks and so forth. If you do have a barcode or ISBN or that kind of thing, go in here. We can choose whether we want to track quantity. Maybe you have so many thousand units of this, or maybe you make the product on demand. You don't need to track quantity, in which case it can never sell out. If you are tracking the quantity, you can choose whether to oversell it by continue selling when out of stock, and you can start an initial quantity of however many units you like. We can also elect to say that this is a physical product. Basically what this means is, do we have to ship this, or is this something that's not shipped? Is it a virtual digital product? If we unclick this, there's no wait, and it won't actually require shipping to check out. And if you only have digital products, and this is unchecked for all of them, you will actually just not have a shipping step in checkout at all, because everything is virtual. But assuming it is a physical product, we will need a wait, so you can do a live calculation if we're doing that. And the customs information we'll talk more about on Thursday in terms of internationalization. But if you are importing something, and then let's say you're buying something that's made in China and you're selling in Canada, you will need to put country of origin and a harmonized customs code to be able to sell that somewhere else. And then finally, we also have the variance, which is basically, do we have options? You know, commonly that's going to be, you know, size or color, the material, a style, or something else custom. So, you know, I might have a size small, medium, you know, and large. And then we can see that when we do that, it's going to show us the different abilities to have different prices, different quantities, and different SKUs for each. So if I make a test product and I put in description, you can see that there's different tools to style it as well. And I'm going to add media. For this case, I just had a random food product. You can see that there's a gallery, and I can just keep adding or dragging and dropping photos. And the product type and vendor are optional. For this, I'll put in the vendor, and I'll put in crackers because that's what they are. And I can save it, and it will make a new product. When I do this, the products will be shown in a listing here, and you can see there'll be this sort of catalog view where I can search and filter and look through, especially if you have a ton of products, what all you have, and you can also see at a glance sort of how many you have for how many different versions and so forth, and you can preview it on an online store. So if you have fairly simple products, making these product records are not going to be a big deal. If you are coming out of the gate and you want to launch an online store with a lot of products, you can actually use a spreadsheet mode to import these instead, so you don't have to keep going through every single one of these steps every single time, which will ultimately take a lot of time. Someone asked about drop shipping. There are a couple different Shopify apps that connect with some of the drop shipping platforms that sort of automatically, you can browse through their catalog and find things and connect and so forth, and it'll wire back the shipping information to them and so forth. I personally don't have experience with it, but there's a few different ways to do it. And we've also had clients that have drop shipping relationships with some of their vendors, in which case it really depends on the drop shipping recipient on how they want that order file. Sometimes you just forward them an order and they take the customer information out of that and they send it directly to the customer. Other times they might have an automated feed and we need an app to sort of parse the order feed and tag the orders and do all kinds of fun stuff. But there are options there. You don't necessarily have to physically have inventory of everything you sell, as long as you have that relationship set up. When we have a product, we can also put it in a collection. So I'm just going to publish this product. And a collection is basically the equivalent to like a catalog, or it's basically a way in which a bunch of different products are associated together. I think there's actually already one here with some demo data. There's no crackers. So if I'm making a crackers collection, I'm going to start stocking a whole bunch of different crackers. Let's say I'm going to create something here. I could automatically look for anything that contains crackers. I could manually curate it and say I just want to drag and drop and add individual products, or have a certain condition or combination of conditions automatically build it so that anytime I add a product to my store, it's automatically snagged into here and auto added and sorted, so I don't have to worry about it. That's primarily how we see folks using this, but if you wanted a sort of manually curated best of, et cetera, collection, you could do that. You can see that now that I've made this collection, there is a list of the products that are in it, and I can also choose to sort it, assuming I had a bunch of different ones of these, sorting it by best selling, A to Z, the newest products that just came out, or manually where I sort of decide what the visual merchandising is. You can have as many collections as you want. You can have as many different products and as many different collections you want. Just because I have this in the one collection doesn't mean I can't also cross-list it somewhere else. So just keeping that in mind, you're not locked into just a one single thing. Basically how you want to split up the products is up to you. So maybe I want to have 3 different products here for the small, the medium, and the large, and those are all separate products. Or maybe I want to have one master product and it's condensing in a bunch of different options. I'm merchandising it as one thing, but it actually has a bunch of different options. That's going to be up to you depending on the type of product you have. And that's something that you want to decide as early as possible, so that you can, not have to redo something down the line, hopefully. Also want to just point out that you can create discounts based on different conditions that you want. So if we want to make a discount code that allows us to just give X amount off everything, we could do that. We could also apply it to specific collections or specific products. We could make an order minimum. We could allow only certain people to be able to use it. We could say 1 use per customer, or we could say, hey, the first 50 people use this coupon will get X. There's a lot of different options, and you can also have official start and end dates to allow, so you don't have to stay out at midnight to turn it off or something like that. You can also do a fixed amount instead of a percentage. You could do a free shipping coupon. So if you just want to limit it to that, you could, instead of a discount per se. And they also allow a certain amount of BOGO, which would basically mean, hey, if you buy one of these things or one of this product, then you could get either a free this or a percentage off that. And that allows you to selectively sort of merchandise and create special things for folks without sort of, giving away the whole thing. Let's see. The quick question on product profits separated or searchable by item. There's a in terms of a COGS report, cost of goods sold, there would be a one master cost of goods report that you could run. For the question about whether you'd want to give percentage of the profits to collaborators, charities, etc., could it be automatically funneled to separate accounts? I believe there's a few apps that will do a sort of charity upsell where it's like, hey, a percentage or our proceeds go to this, and it would sort of calculate for you, but not built into this system. And then just wanted to go also duck into pages and posts. Basically, a page is any type of content that you would add to the system. So if we want to add an about page, we'd say, about us, et cetera, et cetera. You can insert an image, video, et cetera. And this would create a new page that has its own link on the website. As you grow over time, you can do much more than is visible on the screen. We'll get into that when we talk about themes and sort of customizations. Similarly, posts, you can create a blog post really easily. You can have comments or not. You could set it to publish at a certain time. You can call the blog whatever you want, and you could sort of blog here, and it would show up chronologically in a feed on your site as well. And that's pretty straightforward. It's obviously not, if anyone of you have used more of a blogging platform like WordPress, it's not really designed for blogging. It's sort of gravy, it's extra. It is not a great blogging platform because it's an e-commerce platform, but you can do it. And then finally, before we jump into themes, I just want to point out too, you can basically make your own links and navigation for your site, which we'll go into more detail later about, by creating a menu and saying, this is my footer menu. We can add menu items by searching or browsing through the different pages that we have. And we can also, I'm just going to show you this quickly as an example. We have a test page. We can also nest them within each other just by dragging and dropping, and all of a sudden we have a menu and a submenu here. So creating and sort of adding pages to your site is super simple. It should be pretty fast, assuming that you're going to use the sort of general design from one page to the next. If you want to have one landing page look totally different from another page, we're going to be doing that in the themes, which I just want to jump to now so that we have enough time to sort of go through that. So I'm going to switch screens for just 1 minute. All right. And one quick question before I move on: setting up a service versus a product. A service would essentially use the same product record, but how you want to structure it would be handled a bit differently. But as long as your service can have a price, a set price, and have a description and a photo and something else, you could set it up essentially as a product. If you're setting up a service as a subscription, that's a different ballgame, and we'll talk about that on Thursday. This demo store is on basically a basic plan as well. So for themes, a theme is basically a framework in which the design and the sort of code for the site lives. If you're familiar with other platforms like WordPress or whatever, they have themes. Magento has themes, etc. Some people call them templates. A template is technically like one specific design within a theme. And the theme is the designation for the overarching design sort of set. But basically, it's a sort of main layout and design of your store in one package. So if you're looking for a theme, most people are going to start out are not going to hire someone to do a custom, totally bespoke sort of scratch theme. They're going to look for something that's built because it's the running start that sort of gets us going without too much investment. There is a Shopify theme store, which I'll run through in a minute, that basically has ones that are pre-selected by Shopify and vetted and tested by their team so that they are compliant with all the standards that Shopify has. If you Google Shopify themes, you will find other ones on Theme Forest and by independent authors and so forth, which exist, and you could buy them, and they're generally cheaper. The thing is that the quality control and the code review and the sort of accessibility auditing and all the stuff that Shopify does is not there. So the quality of what you're going to get is going to vary a lot. You could try it, but I've also seen themes that people have bought that are pretty shoddily made. So I do recommend if you're starting out to check out the Shopify theme store, which we'll take a quick spin in a minute. Another consideration is ADA or WCAG compliance. ADA is the Americans with Disabilities Act. There's been a whole bunch of lawsuits of late that are setting precedents that the ADA rules, like you would have a wheelchair ramp at a restaurant, would also apply to web because web businesses are public-facing businesses. WCAG is an acronym for the basically the accessibility standards specific to the web. That's a consortium of different organizations, nonprofits that set those, and they say these are the best practices for how to make your website accessible. Shopify themes have been including this recently. It's something that's I'll link to in the resources, something to just be aware of. It's a lot to dive into, but I just want to flag it that is there, and that's something that ultimately should be on your list of things to think about. In terms of picking a theme, there's a lot of different design options. Some people want to go very, very minimal, and other people want the entire kitchen sink and every single option in it. There's going to be a range there, and you can sort of decide what's right to you, but know that there's going to be always usually something in a theme that you don't actually need, but it's sort of built for as many people as possible, so it's going to be there, and you might have to take it out. I will say beware the product demo bias, which means that if you want to sell tea online and you see a theme and the demo product is tea, you're probably going to be more inclined to like it because it looks more close to your store that you want to have, regardless of whether the design is actually what you need or not. So just be careful. If there happen to be demo products that are the type of products that you want to sell, it doesn't mean that that theme is going to be great for them. It just means that happens to be the demo content, and it could be great using another theme that actually meets your needs. When we look at themes, we want to be looking at the menu structure and how images are handled and things like that, which are really going to be the differentiators. And really you can plug whatever type of product you want into it. It's in theory, the theme is product agnostic. And then I also encourage you to think about typography as fonts really do make a big difference in how we perceive a brand. So is it friendly? Is it fancy? Is it aggressive? Is it, old-timey? All these things can be expressed through type. Shopify now builds in the monotype library and some Google fonts into the themes. So I will link to those, and you'll get this in the deck as well. I would just encourage you, even if you don't consider yourself a real, designer type of person, to just flip through and just see what options are out there. One of the biggest differentiators you can have as a brand is to have a type that not everyone else is using. We see a lot of trends in type where we'll see 100 stores and 80 of them will be using the same font. It'll look similar to other stores, which might make you think, well, it looks trustworthy, but on the other hand, it just looks like a lot of other stores. Doesn't mean you go wild and crazy and using this, super zany font, but just think about what might be right for you and just really spend some time to flip through them and see what resonates. It will ultimately make a difference for the brand. So we're going to hop back to the browser. We're going to look through theme store options. We're going to look at a theme and the theme customizer and see what settings there are, and then talk briefly about code, and then hopefully we'll wrap up with some time for questions as well. So let's change up gears again here. All right. So this is the Shopify theme store. I will also share the link in the presentation to this. This is basically that sort of vetted repository of themes that Shopify provides. As you can see, they show you different demos using different types of products. They have some categories on, ones stylistically that you might gravitate towards, different industries again, but any theme can ultimately work with anything else. But if you are in food and beverage, you might want to check out the food and beverage ones and seeing how that works, that looks to you. If you browse through and you see something that you like, you can just click on it. It'll give you more details in terms of the features that it has, what the support is, the documentation for it, different sort of featured stores that are using it, and some reviews. I have to say there's not usually a ton of people come back and review them, so I would take the reviews with a little bit of a grain of salt. But you can actually try it out in your store by doing the try theme, and it'll actually install it temporarily in your store so you can sort of see how it looks. Or you could view a demo, and if you click that, you can actually see that we go to an actual, just loading a little bit slowly, it goes to a demo store that they've sort of built out with all these different options. So you can see it a little more clearly. I will encourage you to also not just look at this on your desktop. So when you're setting up your store, you're administering your store, you're making decisions like this, I will say 99% of the time you will probably be on a desktop or a laptop computer because it's just easier to work that way, multitask, get things done. However, in terms of the traffic coming to your store, most people these days are using mobile devices. A majority of the traffic on the web is mobile. So you can see up here in this sort of previewer, it'll also allow you to toggle to a mobile view so you can see what the web layout is for mobile. And so don't forget to also evaluate it from that perspective, because ultimately, actually, most of your customers might see this view first, at least. The theme store fees are one-time fees. So if you pay $180, that's it. You purchased that as a static one-time thing. And within the store themes, there are different font options. So we'll see that in a minute when we go to the theme customizer. You will have different drop downs, and there'll be sort of presets of a few dozen different ways of doing that, and are different options, and you can select. If you want to use a completely custom font that you found somewhere else, maybe you found it on Adobe Fonts or My Fonts or somewhere else, you can have someone install that for you and configure it. It'll take some custom code to do, but you can use basically any web font that you find. It's just a question of how built into the system it is. So another question from, does mobile mean mobile web viewer? Does Shopify have an app available? For this, I'm talking about a responsive website that basically is elastic. So it shows from any screen size down to mobile. There is a Shopify app for the admin area to administer your store, but by having a store, you don't sort of have your own app with it, although certainly people could make that for you. All right, so if I like the theme, I can hit try theme. I have one set up already here, so I'm just gonna flip to my store. You can also see that you can visit the theme store through the link in your admin, and there are free ones. So there's different free themes that are actually pretty good. Obviously, if it's free, probably more people are gonna use them, and you might see it more around the web. But basically, you could use a free one, you can pay for one, and use it as a starting point. The other thing is, as you can see, I have multiple versions of different themes here. I could start with one, install it, configure it, use it for 6 months, a year, for 2 years, however long, and decide, hey, I want a new look, I can preview a theme that's not published and preview that onto my store without actually having everyone see it yet. And so that's really good when you're trying to figure out, well, do I want to go with a new look or develop something new? You can actually preview it without fully just changing everything that you've done to date. In this theme editor, you can see that under actions, I could rename it. So I could give it a version or a date. I can duplicate it, so I can make a backup copy for myself. I could download it. That's also making a backup copy. It just emails it to you instead of having it in this list here. You can edit the code and languages, which we'll talk about in a minute, and you can also preview it and customize it. So if you go into Customizer, that's, as a non-programmer, that's probably going to be primarily how you're editing your theme. What it's going to do is going to give you a little bit of a visual interface in order to interact with your store. You can see that I have different modules here. I have a menu that was wired up previously. I have search and the cart and so forth. There are some universal settings here, like type, where I can change from a different list of fonts. I can also change the sort of default sizing, what my base sizing is, the scaling of the text. I can change my colors for different buttons and different elements. And I can hook up my social media links and my sharing option settings and so forth. Just because there's only color set for these doesn't mean you can't customize it everything, but this is the way to do it without code, and beyond that, you may need to enlist some help to really override certain things or provide different options and so forth. Also universal are going to be the header and the footer sections. You can see that I would have my logo upload, setting the size of it, the orientation of it. I might want to have an announcement bar on the site that would show a sale or something like that. And different themes are going to have different pre-built options. There might be more options for a different theme than another, depending on the features that you saw when you got it. You can see that I can toggle the visibility of something on and off, and it's going to show me this sort of live preview. Again, it's not actually live until I save it and I make the change. So if I turn that off, you can see it's going to prompt me to save. If I just leave and I don't save, this will not be turned off because I haven't saved. So whatever you're doing here still has to be saved before it's pushed live if you're working on the live theme. We can also see that we can rearrange the order of these elements. We can add new elements from the list of pre-built things. And again, this is going to depend based on your theme. And it's going to allow you to configure all kinds of different options depending on the type of module that you have. The home page is not the only place that we can do this. If I switch to a product page, for instance, you'll see that there's going to be product page specific options for this. It's less drag and drop, at least in a sort of simple baseline free theme that we have here, but we can still change different options and see those reflected here as well. And the same with something like the cart or the collection or so forth. There's going to be different options on, hey, how wide do I want my grid to be? How many products per row? Do I want it in a list view or grid view? All these fun different things that we can do. So you have a little bit more of a visual interface. It's not Squarespace in terms of drag and drop and just sort of creating your own pages on the fly, but it will give you a certain amount of options without also the ability to sort of mess things up. You're still within that sort of sandbox of the things that you can do. There's also universal language settings, which for today we're going to talk about English language, but basically any theme, every theme has a language file, so that if you don't like the verbiage for the cart and you want to say, I want it to actually be called the bag instead of the cart, all the different system language for all the different labels, the add to cart button, what the cart is called, all these sort of things are saved in a language file here. This is ultimately how people do translation as well, but there's also just a default English one. So if I want to call it the my bag, and I say your bag here, and I save it, what will happen is that when we go to the cart page, you'll see that it says your bag instead of your cart, and so forth. So there's also options there. You know, this continue shopping button, the fact that it says continue shopping, you want to change to something else, that's also all changeable as well. Given all that, I know it's a lot, and I apologize for the speed. There is, of course, the underlying code behind this that's powering all these different interactions and options. I'm going to peel behind the curtain here for a minute just to show you how the templates are set up. So if you really get your hands dirty and you start programming, you can know sort of what's there. You can see that our theme overall has a layout page, and it has, this was for the master layout. So this would include all of the metadata that Google needs to know to set up the page title and the structure and whether it's searchable and so forth. And all of the files that are called and JavaScript and the styling and all that fun stuff. But you can see there's also more discernible templates like, hey, this is the blog article template. And this is all the HTML and Liquid code, which is basically a Shopify template code that's based on Ruby on Rails, and CSS and JavaScript and anything else that's in here. These template files are broken down by default, or there's one blog and there's one article. But if I had multiple blogs and I had multiple different article views, I could make alternate templates for those different types of pages. And that would allow me to have the same type of page with a different view. Then I could set certain articles or certain posts, certain pages, certain types of products, etc. So right now I have one product template, but let's say I have one product that has custom options and one product that doesn't. I could make a template called product.custom that I assign just to custom product, and maybe I build this one out with different options, different interface, different buttons, different whatever I need to make that product sellable and function. So over time, you know, the amount of modules that you have, for instance, on the homepage could be added to, could be expanded, could be customized. And so this structure, even though it looks super daunting now, means that even though you have a pretty intuitive interface in the admin and other places, when it comes to the building and designing and structuring the site, you have a ton of options. Because basically anything in this theme file, we can call out the different product attributes in code. We can loop them in with JavaScript, HTML, and CSS. We can make them conditional based on all kinds of different things, and we can actually run logic that steps through all kinds of different combinations to make a lot of different things possible. And so that's why at the end of the day, when we're building a Shopify store, you know, we have a client that has 10,000 products and they have one product template because we're able to run through logic based on all the different attributes and tie in and pull in all these different things with theme code to make that possible. So it is extremely extensible. I don't expect you to know how to dive into this or touch this. There are a lot of folks such as myself who are Shopify experts. That's a sort of certification program. Or if you are using a different platform, there's all kinds of different professionals who can say, hey, I want to build this type of feature. Can you design that? Can you build that, et cetera? And their job is to go in, get their hands dirty, and make something that then becomes something that you can check a box and activate that without having to go under the hood. But there are, just like you take your car to a mechanic, there are people who specialize in doing the under the hood stuff and wiring that up. A question about whether themes apply to all the different pages on the Shopify site, or do you need to purchase one theme for products, one theme for about us, etc. You have one theme for the entire site. Each different view has its own template within the theme. but you just have one theme that's published at any given time, and that handles everything. I would say when you're evaluating, where are we here? When you're evaluating themes in the theme store, what I look for is primarily, what is the navigation like? Do I like the way the navigation looks? The menus, the drop downs, the mobile menu, the search, like how does that function? Because that's the stuff that people are using all the time. And then beyond that, do I like the way that the blocking is laid out? Try to ignore the font, try to ignore the color, that's easily changed. And then also I would say a big logic lift, if you are going to have someone customize the site, is how the product images are handled. If you don't like how the product images are handled on the theme, I would not pick the theme. If you don't like the navigation of a theme, but you like other things, I would not pick the theme, because ripping out the navigation and redoing it, or ripping out the product images and redoing it, you can do, but that's something that could take even a professional something like 8 to 10 hours to do, and it's just going to be sort of a more expensive, more involved job. So I would say dialing in and tweaking other types of things, but in the core view, if you're looking at themes, think about, okay, how do I use navigation there, and how do I interact with that, versus and how do I interact with the product, and do I like that? And if I like that, then we're probably in a pretty good shape. And then I just want to pop back to the deck for one last thing. Which is mobile. I mentioned this a little bit, I got ahead of myself, but basically, don't underestimate how many people use mobile and use mobile devices primarily. And usually, even if you're not necessarily buying on mobile all the time, it's a lot of times how people discover a brand, because of social media, social ads, and just, we're on the go. That's what happens. So make sure that you're paying attention to the mobile view of your site, even if when you are the site administrator, are always on a desktop machine. That's a trap that I even find myself getting into, is that because I'm at work on a desktop computer all the time, I think about things in desktop view. In reality, you need to think about things in the mobile view, because most people are looking at it mobile, and just don't forget about that. So given that extremely whirlwind adventure into the world of e-commerce, I want to thank you for all putting up with me and listening. I want to just briefly outline, first of all, there's some resources. I'm linking to a few things in here, and hopefully also the organizer will share out any other links that came up in the questions. I want to first say, before we go into questions too, on Thursday, if you can make it, we will be covering information architectures, which is basically how do you structure your site. What are the core pages and trust signals that you should have for e-commerce site for you to sort of adhere to the best practice of e-commerce, to look like a well-functioning site, and for people to believe in your brand. We'll talk about getting started with shipping and fulfillment. We'll go more into shipping options and show a few more advanced shipping apps and what you can do with those, including pickup and delivery ones. We'll be going through customer service best practices, not only like what are good ways or the best practices on how to interact with customers, but also how do you do returns and refunds, and just to deal with some of those issues that come up, and showing you in the admin how that works. We'll cover some international sales basics and what are some of the gotchas and pitfalls and things to consider before selling internationally that I've learned through our clients over the years. We'll look at some apps and digital services. And we'll talk a little bit about launching and how to set up that, your domain and switch that over. And then we'll be going through very, very top level about digital marketing basics, content, SEO, ads, social and email, and a little bit about analytics if we can squeeze that in. So that's what's still yet to come in the setup. So we're definitely not done with setting things up here or demoing things or talking about things, but just so you know, that's what's ahead. And then I think if there are folks with more questions, I'm happy to sort of take some time to go through those as well. Resources, these will be links that are shared in that deck too, just so you have that. Shopify sign up, theme store, some password managers, things about web accessibility, and the Shopify forums, which are a good place to search for other people's questions and also potentially post your own, get some free advice. So I'm just going to go through the Q&A sort of backlog, what I wasn't able to answer on the fly, and sorry if it's been a little bit of a wait. Selling ebooks and PDFs, you can do that. There is an app called Sendowl, which I've seen most people use, that automatically delivers the product that you make in Shopify and associates that with a PDF basically, or a Mobi or whatever e-reader format you have. And as soon as someone buys it, it auto detects that that's what they bought, sends them a link, I think you can set whether they're able to access it, 3 times or 5 times, or expires in 30 days, or that kind of thing. So there's definitely services for selling ebooks or any kind of digital goods as well. Can you have an affiliate on your store site without being owned by them? Amazon. Don't exactly know what that means. If that means can you use affiliate marketing programs where you can have other people sort of referring business to you and you give them a cut? The answer is yes, there are affiliate programs that work with platforms like Shopify. And you can sell things on Amazon without being owned, those products being owned by Amazon. So there's a lot about that on the web, but it's basically like there's Amazon FBA, which is fulfilled by Amazon, or there's where you just put the product listing in Amazon, but you still hold the inventory and you send it out once that order comes in. So there's a couple of different ways to do that. Do APOs count under international? APO, FPO by default is considered part of the United States because the U.S. Postal Service services APO, FPO, so I would not consider it international. But it does mean, obviously, you can't ship FedEx to APO. So really, if you're, for whatever reason, not able to ship your product via the Postal Service, then I would say that would probably knock out APO, FPO as an option, but it's not technically international. Are languages for the Shopify storefront unlimited? Are they limited by the theme type? Will the type of currency be automatically translated? The languages are, I wouldn't call any language unlimited with any platform because you have to translate it. If you happen to have a lot of translators on Payroll and you could do a whole bunch of different versions of your site, you could. Generally, I only see sites being translated if you are a native speaker in that language, and we'll get into that more on Thursday in internationalization. But keep in mind, if you have a language translation for your site in Spanish, people are going to expect that if they call you up or they email you, you're going to be able to provide customer service in that language. There are different ways of translating currency as well, but internationalization is incredibly complicated. I do not recommend that you start out there. I recommend that you can provide shipping services to different countries if you can support it, but keeping your site and support in English with the understanding that you can't necessarily support those other languages unless you happen to be multilingual yourself. But it gets very, very complicated, and I'd say that's something that's a phase 2, grow into it, not start out of the gate with it. Does Shopify provide an email address for your shop? I prefer not to use a Gmail address. So good question. Shopify will send emails on your behalf for those transactional emails like the order confirmations, but it does not have any email system built into it. You need an external email provider. However, you could use, Google keeps renaming it. I think now it's called Google for Work. It used to be called G Suite, but basically you could have a Gmail address that's under your own domain. So it doesn't look like your shop at gmail.com, which I would agree is not super professional. So, but you would require another email hosting service. Google Workspace. I think that's the maybe third time they've renamed it in 3 years. I can never remember. Well, because another question, I currently use Google Workspace for email syncing. Do you use this for your own e-commerce site or is something better? I would use Google for email. They really are the gold standard in terms of deliverability and features and cost. It's what I use personally, and that's what I recommend for other folks as well. I've been involved for a lot of other types of email migrations for other systems, and it's generally kind of a mess. So I do recommend that. Can you make one store and white label the underlying content for potential clients? Not super easily, but I would say you could make kind of a demo store and ultimately clone it and sort of syndicate that out in different copies of the stores. But I wouldn't say it's not easy to like white label the single store and sell under different brands. I've had people ask me that. I've seen people try it, but I would recommend doing separate stores. Does the basic 29 cover all that you showed us in the demo? $29 a month for the basic plan. Yes, but the one caveat is real-time carrier shipping. We'll talk about that more on Thursday. There is a way, if you pay Shopify annually, they will give you real-time carrier shipping for free instead of it being a $19 a month add-on on the basic plan. So if you pay the basic plan annually, you can get them to give you real-time carrier shipping. That's the one caveat. Is load speed the same for all Shopify stores as a way to optimize? The load time is, I mean, it's sort of the similar types of servers. So in theory, the load time is the same, but it's really actually going to depend on your theme code, the images and the assets that you're uploading. And there are ways to optimize and do site speed optimization at the code level. But in terms of like the actual core speed of the service, it's going to be similar. Unless you go to Shopify Plus, which is the enterprise edition, then there are actual differences, but that's thousands of dollars a month and not something you jump to just for that. And there is a CDN, which Shopify has built in. So anytime you upload anything to Shopify, it is syndicated into their CDN, but you can still upload a 4 megabyte image that should not be delivered on the web, and it will allow you to upload it. So you still have to have some amount of best practice in terms of optimizing your images for web before they get uploaded. I have a residential cleaning service in process with a local cleaning solution to sell on a, sorry, the screen's moving and I'm trying to read it. Sell on a business page online. Is there a partner solution to our individual businesses? Should we develop our own marketplace together or just use Shopify? It sounds like if the primary business is the cleaning service and the sort of secondary business is to sell product, that you might want to do one of those start small platforms or something, because you're not going to use a lot of the features necessarily, but it sounds like I'm not sure what the business relationship is there. So I guess just know that if you are selling something on a Shopify store, all the money will go into one place. And if you have to pay someone out later, you'll need to sort of come up with your own reporting on that and so forth. I'm not sure if that answers it. That's as close as I can get at the moment, sorry. Joan asks, you can't ship international with FedEx. No, I was just saying you can't ship to APO or FBO, military addresses with FedEx. You can ship internationally with FedEx. So I'm not sure exactly what the question is. They generate shipping label. You can make shipping labels within Shopify. We'll talk about that on Thursday. And Pirate Ship does integrate with Shopify as well. Product labeling, e.g. French and Spanish is required when selling internationally. Not necessarily, but if your product is, then any recommendation on how to address that? I would imagine if you do have a requirement of product labeling, I don't know if this is going to be compliant. What I would come up with is probably the best, easiest solution would be to have some sort of insert card that goes into an international package. that would have all the translations or the product nutrition label or whatever you need as a add-in rather than, you know, changing your packaging to suit. I don't know if that's compliant. If that is, that seems to me like that would be the best way to do that. But I would try to find someone who is in that industry or category and figure out how they've done it before. What is real-time carrier shipping? That basically means when you have a live rate that's hooked up into your shopping cart. So if someone checks out, they're seeing a dynamic rate from FedEx, UPS, or USPS, where the carrier is providing the rate. You're not creating a flat rate. It's not something that's static. It's when you're getting the rate directly from the carrier. And that means as someone's checking out, they put in their address, it pings FedEx. FedEx gives a rate and pushes it back into your cart. What is the recommended or best platform for a produce/perishable food product? That really depends on how you're going to deliver that product. If you have a delivery only business, and if you have local pickup, if you're trying to ship it, I would say the caveat with e-commerce platforms in general is that they're not designed to sell dynamic weights. So with something like produce or meat or cheese, where you might have something that's 0.6 pounds and you're trying to sell it by the pound, you cannot have a fractional inventory amount, for instance, in Shopify or really any other e-commerce platform, and that presents problems. So typically you would have to sell say a half pound is 1 unit, or 1 pound is 1 unit, or a pound and 3/4 is a single unit. So if you can sell the produce or whatever perishables with unit pricing instead of per pound sort of selection, that's going to be how most people get around that. That's pretty much going to be universal for anything that's not like a deli point of sale system. Yeah. Another question, would you recommend using a separate CRM, or does Shopify do this also? We use MailChimp for email. What do you recommend we do away with MailChimp and use Shopify's email marketing features instead? Thursday, we will talk on more depth about email marketing. I found Shopify's email system is very rudimentary. So unless you've just never done email marketing before, and this is your first time, you want to sort of get your feet wet, I would not recommend it. MailChimp is fine and can integrate with Shopify via an app. There's also others like Klaviyo, which we'll talk about tomorrow. I'm sure other people have heard of. There's a half dozen others, Constant Contact, etc. In most cases, you can get Shopify and the email marketing platform to sync. The question is just how much data flows between them. Does all of their orders come into the email platform or not? Or is it just their name and their email address and stuff like that? We'll talk about that more on Thursday. I don't necessarily recommend a separate CRM. I advocate for having as much data syncs between your email platform and Shopify so that you can do smarter marketing and smarter segmentation and filtering in terms of who gets what, and saying, hey, did so-and-so bought something last month, don't send those emails, stuff like that. But in general, I find that until you get to like a fairly large business level where you would have an ERP software that would like kind of handle everything, and those are the sort of huge, tens of thousands of dollar pieces of software that would run back-end logistics and that kind of thing. Unless you're using an ERP, I find most people would use Shopify as the main CRM, because that's really the lifeblood of your business is the online store orders, and so that's really the compendium of that. We'll talk about on Thursday Google Analytics. I see Google Analytics as the non-personally identifiable information sort of aggregator, where it's like all of your marketing data should go into Google Analytics, and then still consider Shopify as your core CRM in terms of it connecting out to different services, but it's still being the core because that's where the orders really live. couple more questions. So we shouldn't use Google email unless it's via G Suite. I personally don't. My opinion is that it's a red flag if a business has not set up their own domain email. So if your business is called Your Business LLC, and I go to your website and something at Gmail, to me that's kind of sketchy, because it's like, well, if you have this business, why don't you have a business email? And so to me, that actually raises a red flag in terms of legitimacy of the business, because anyone can just go and register Gmail. So I would strongly recommend that you use at yourname.com official business address. Call it customer service, call it orders, call it info, whatever you want, but to have something that's not just your business name at gmail.com, because to me that could be a fraud site that someone just spun up and they didn't have full control over the domain, so they couldn't whatever. To me, that's a red flag for trust. Let's see, question about Etsy. A common criticism is that they overregulate or police shops too much. One maker can accuse another maker of stealing their design, little no proof. I have read about that as well. What's been your experience with Shopify regarding these types of issues? I don't think I've seen product infringement cases with Shopify stores. Etsy has that level of control because they are the marketplace, and all product listings are going through them. So it's, when it comes to independent stores, it's really, I find, typically a non-issue. The only thing I would say is if you as a store owner find another Shopify store that's a knockoff sort of scam version of your store, which hopefully you never do, but you never know, then you would have to make your case to Shopify to try to take that down. And that's where trademark and copyright and all that fun stuff really comes into play. Image watermarking is maybe something you'd want to do as well if you're making your own goods, so you can prove that they took your images or something. That makes it easier to get a takedown, but it's not really the same game as the sort of trust and security teams of Etsy or others. Another question, does small business office have a resource for product liability insurance so our online shoppers are protected? I don't know exactly what you mean by product liability insurance. There are software services that offer like independent shipping insurance. And on the vendor side, like you as the seller, there are anti-fraud services that will take your orders and analyze them and determine whether they think they could be fraudulent. And then if they end up being fraudulent, they will give you basically insurance on that. I don't know of any other type of insurance that's typically offered in that sort of category. Does Shopify charge a percentage of sales, or is the monthly fee the only charge? Shopify does not charge a percentage of sales unless you have a store that makes way more money than like as tens of millions of dollars a year. There's a special plan and certain things happen, yada yada. But the monthly fee is typically the only charge. However, the payment processing is a percentage of sales, and that's where you pay no matter where your store is. So the base rate is 2.9% per transaction plus 30 cents. That's the same on Square, that's the same on Squarespace, that's the same on wherever processor. There's different Shopify plans where that gets lower and they sort of cut you a better deal, but you'll pay credit card processing wherever you go. I don't know the URL at the beginning. And something going wrong with the product if someone breaks down a rash with not following instructions. I don't know of any sort of liability with that. Sorry. Where's a good resource to find a good accountant that knows the ins and outs of small businesses? I would actually say Chamber of Commerce, SBA, VBOC, these local organizations will probably have good referrals for you in terms of starting points, and they might even be doing small business workshops where they bring in someone from the local community to like do teach the basics of business accounting and that kind of thing. Otherwise, of course, there's always Google. For my own personal accountant, I was able to ask someone that I knew whose parents had had a business for a long time, who was local to me, said, hey, what are your folks use for accounting or whatever, and sort of personal referral, but I would just, call around for rates and stuff like that. And yeah, I think you can email vboc@hawaii.edu also for other business questions in the chat.
Okay.
I think that rounds it out.
Thank you very much, Paolo. That was very informative and very, very helpful. Thank you for great questions, everyone. Please don't forget to join us on Thursday at the same time. Please mark your calendars and look for our reminder email. And yes, I will send you this presentation in your email as well as recording. And we really look forward to seeing you on Thursday. Thank you so much, Paolo, one more time. This was great.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Right.
Aloha. Take care.